Okay, we've got a theme with our guest speakers, and that is they have all been honored as 40 under 40 recipients from Sports Business Journal. That award has been out there for I would say, close to 20 years now, and I think it is incredibly important. We've been very successful, again, to have the honorees that we have, but to have them lined up tonight really is great for us. We're going to start with Jessie Giordano. Jessie's the class of 2010, so she's representing her 10-year reunioners out there, and we welcome you all back so very much and passionately, because we know you have that passion for the program. Very quickly, Jessie came to OU from Mercyhurst. She was a soccer player there, actually captained the team, and then after finishing her degree, went to Sportsmark, and then on into GMR as part of that acquisition and merger. Jessie is currently Senior Vice President, Client Consulting and Services, and head of their San Francisco office. So Jessie, the platform is yours, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thanks, Matt, and hey, everyone. Such an honor to be here. Nobody told me I'd be following Doc, so I think the pressure obviously is even a little bit higher here now. But can everyone see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, first, virtual symposium. I have to be honest, it's probably way more pressure than when I thought I was signing up to be the keynote, because we all know nobody goes to symposium for the speakers. I was really banking on everybody being half drunk by now and recovering from Court Street hangovers. So we'll see how I fare here for the next 20 minutes. But maybe as only appropriate to start Symposium Friday, let's all first raise a glass to Court Street maybe, and just cheers to an amazing program first. All right. So, what I thought I'd do is maybe first a little bit about me. Who am I? Why the heck am I talking to you? What's my journey in sports? And then we can kind of dive into a little bit of a conversation. But perhaps call it my life in pictures. My journey in sports business started, as Matt said, at Mercyhurst College. And here, the picture that you see, I was fortunate enough to play on the women's soccer team with one of my dearest friends still to this day, and actually a fellow classmate of mine at Ohio, Maria Amacone-Home. So that was awesome. And then, sometimes it's all about timing. I'm truly a believer of that. I ended up staying my 5th year just for the fall to play. I had torn my ACL as a sophomore, and so had redshirted and said, I know I'm not going to have a career in soccer, but I'm going to take it for all it's worth and play as long as I can. So I stayed that fall, and Jan Katzoff, who is the founder of Sportsmark, came to Mercyhurst to do a distinguished speaker talk, and kind of I immediately fell in love with this idea of there's a career working on the world's biggest stages around, some of those marquee events that we all know and love as fans. So I met Jan. I immediately jumped on a plane to San Francisco a few months later. Having never been west of the Mississippi, I had nothing but 2 suitcases. And it was a dream. Like, I lived a dream world for the next 4 years. I traveled the world managing B2B experiences at places like, the NCAA Final Four. I was managing the Hartford's NCAA partnership at the time, FIFA World Cup, the Olympic Games, X Games, and everything in between. And I really attribute that operational foundation to a lot of kind of who I am today, and that disciplined approach of how do you break down a super complex problem and bring it to life in a really powerful way. So it was awesome, but especially in your early 20s and living in San Francisco. But I had always told myself I wanted to go back to grad school. And I was from Ohio, Cleveland born and raised. And I think for an Ohio gal, and it worked out that my sister happened to be college roommates with Megan Kaler as well. So that didn't hurt the situation. But there's no question in my mind that, Ohio was going to be the school I went back to when I was ready to go back to grad school. So that brings us here. It's insane to think that it's been 10 years. I was one of the MSA onlys in the class, and so I had to pack that full Ohio experience into 1 year. So I might say it's all a bit of a blur. Why it's a blur, we can share next year on Court Street, and we can share those stories. But it was truly an incredible year. But the picture to call out is that third picture. And I got to thank these two guys for why I'm sitting here today. If it wasn't Rob Norris and Garrett Monroe reminding me every single day for a full year that I was the least valuable development graduate assistant ever known to Ohio, I might have actually gone into college athletics. I had gone back thinking like, okay, this global thing was really cool, but I, as a college soccer player, I've got this place in my heart for college athletics and might want to, make that transition. And then I sat next to these guys every day and realized I couldn't hold a candle to them. So a huge thanks to those guys. And they remind me that I am 40 under 40 because of them, that's for sure. So post-graduation, I ignored all of Kaylor's advice. I didn't take any of those amazing job offers that we all got for $20,000 a year. And I actually took a contract position for the summer back with Sportsmark at the 2010 FIFA World Cup at the time in South Africa. And thank God I ignored Kaylor because I actually met my husband, Steve, in South Africa. He was working for Visa at the time, and we had lived 7 miles apart in San Francisco, but hadn't run across each other until we were in South Africa. So again, all about time and place. So that took me back to San Francisco at GMR. And so I've now, again, crazy, been with GMR for 10 years. GMR runs really green. I guess Ohio runs really deep at GMR. So we've got an amazing crew of alumni within the GMR offices. And for those of you that may not be as familiar, just a quick hit on GMR. We're a global agency whose purpose is really to create experiences that, kind of take our clients' brands and cement them into the memories of their audiences. So, we do that across all passion points. And I think that's why I've stayed for those 10 years, is because of the dynamic nature and the ever-changing, kind of focus of our agency and our clients. So, at GMR, I've kind of worn many a hat over those 10 years. I led all of our commercial property sales for the America's Cup, for the FIFA World Cup in 2014. Worked on Super Bowl 50 in our own backyard, and Brent's obviously going to talk about his role with the 49ers here soon. Worked on global consulting, and now, as Matt said, leading our San Francisco office as well. And the last about me, and I share this also because at any moment my kids may run through here creating havoc, but that last picture, the most special moment for me, it was actually last summer when I got to take my family to the Women's World Cup in France and actually experience it through Emma, my 5-year-old daughter's perspective. So it's kind of that ultimate payoff for all of the global travel that that I do during the year. So that's a little bit about me. So that, what was, when we originally talked about what I was going to share with Kayla and Christian when they reached out, this is perfect. You're focused on the Olympics. We're going to be right before the games. Why don't you kind of give everyone a sneak preview? And clearly that has gone out the window. So, what I would say is what I probably would have talked about had things remained the same was that Tokyo was going to be the first games in Japan since 1964. It was going to be a huge moment for Tokyo, for Japan, as a point of pride, really, for that country. We probably would have talked about the fact that, this games would have been 33 sports, 3 being first-time sports, skateboarding, rock climbing, and surfing, which is, obviously a totally new look for the Olympics and the IOC as they try to, build the next generation of Olympic fans. We probably would have talked about the fact that Tokyo was set to be the most innovative games, the global coming out, if you will, for 5G. For those of us that are kind of like commercially minded and follow kind of sponsorship revenue, TOCOG blew it out of the water, right? It was the largest domestic portfolio ever, 67 partners, over $3 billion in revenue for the organizing committee. They've set a bar that is, going to be nearly impossible for Beijing and Paris to hit, and maybe only LA will come close to that. And then from a GMR perspective and a personal perspective, we had 12 clients who we were going to activate programs for, and was a huge kind of focus of me and my teams. And so we probably could have talked and shared some of that too. But obviously the world has changed pretty significantly, right? And we all know this. Any of us, whether we're fans, whether we're watching it from an industry, from a career perspective, there's no denying, right, that there is not a single league, team, event that has not been impacted. And I definitely won't go deep into this slide, but I think it's just when you see it all in one place, right, it's hard to ignore kind of the impact to our industry and to our profession as well. But it's Friday, and we're going to talk about some good news. We call it Good News Friday at GMR. And so I was thinking about, like, after all of this, and Kayla calls back and she's like, hey, can you still talk at the virtual symposium? I'm like, what the hell am I going to talk about that anybody's going to care about given the state of the world? And, I figured that maybe we could just use a little good news. And especially for this year's class, like, we were talking about it with our class of 2010 of, like, worst job market ever, clearly, for anyone to have to go into. And you're probably thinking, like, what did we do, right? Like, here we are, without a whole lot of options on the table. But, what we wanted to share was, like, there is, like, sports and entertainment, the world needs us now in a global pandemic just as much as perhaps prior to. So that's what we thought we'd talk about this afternoon. All right. So when we think about fandom, clearly a lot has changed in the world, but the core driver of fandom hasn't changed. That idea of, like, there are deep human needs. There's these emotional states that drive us as fans, us as people that want to consume sport, consume experiences, to consume live events, that drive us. And it's kind of like that, uncomplicated, like, inherently human driver. And GMR did a study, a fan EQ study, and 89% of the people we talked about said release. Release is actually the most important need state, or the reason why people consume sports and entertainment. And release, when we think about it, is really just that kind of escape from daily life, right? It's the ability to kind of, in the always on world that we live in, like, stop for that moment in time and enjoy the surroundings, the moment, the passions that we all share. And in the extreme case of a global pandemic, like, sport and fandom still delivers against that kind of need state of release. So I just thought that was kind of like a really interesting perspective to share with everyone. So why more than ever, right, do we as global fans and those that we serve in our industry need sports? And we think about it, there's going to be 3 phases of kind of the return from COVID, right? Like, we're in phase 1. It's still early. It's fresh. We're responding and reacting to the situation in front of us. And so right now what we're seeing, from the leagues, the teams, the athletes, from the broadcasters and content providers, is kind of all about that feel-good content right now. Like, The Last Dance is a prime example. It is crushed, like, all ratings, right? It's the #1 watched sports programming right now. And it's really that ability for sport and sports content to help us stay energized and engaged while we're at home, right? To give us that release. As we think about phase 2, it's going to all about recovery, returning to normalcy. Like, how do we, come out of our quarantine and show up at a stadium with 100,000, other people at it. And sports is going to do that. Sports is going to lead the way back, right? We're going to go back to the things we love. We're going to build that sense of safety and hope and security by doing the things that we just care about, right? And sports is at the forefront of that. And then phase 3 is kind of all about revival, right? It's like the next generation. And there's no denying, like, things are going to change for sure. But it's how do we evolve? How do we innovate? How do we grow? Like, how do we, really chart the future for fans? And I think, sports is going to be that kind of vital mechanism. And we, at least, my purview is look at next year and the postponement of the Olympic Games as kind of the world's coming out and an ability to really celebrate that revival in a post-pandemic world. So clearly a lot has changed. Fandom hasn't. We need it now more than ever. And oh, by the way, like, the activity and the numbers are showing us that, right? Like, fans are still engaging at record numbers. And so you look at the draft as an example, 15 million viewers, right? Like, people are tuning in to those virtual and digital events more than ever. eSports, it's something that the industry has been talking about, for years now. Like, is it real? Is it going to last? What's the phenomenon behind it? And again, this has kind of accelerated its normalcy and mainstream. And we're seeing traditional leagues across the board really, leveraging and engaging with esports as a mechanism to keep their fans engaged. Again, interactive fan events, we're watching it all over the world. It's in the US, obviously in China and Europe, and it's just an opportunity for people to think and act differently, which has been really cool to watch. Other ways that we're seeing, we talked about that evergreen content. Like, content is definitely king now more than ever in COVID, and The Last Dance, obviously the prime example of that. Athlete-led content. I mean, I think that, we've all said there's this like groundswell the last couple of years of athletes becoming their own brands. And this just continues to reiterate and accelerate that. And then the rebroadcast and archives, and, that's a prime example of the Masters and having the Tiger Woods and Jim Nance call. So really just, I think we're all watching it, but, fun to kind of stop and see it all come together there. And then the biggest good news piece of this Friday is, like, with all of that, sports is still uniting the world. There's still amazing feel-good stories that are coming from it, right? Like, we're seeing it across, again, every league, every team, every individual. And I think, at least personally, like, that's the stuff, like, we can all get totally sucked into the, the number of cases and the kind of the stats of COVID-19. But, like, this is the stuff that is, continuing to fuel our spirits and kind of like keep us really engaged in this time. So I cannot take credit for this final slide. Becca Hemby, class of 2015, was the brain trust behind this statement, but I thought it was so good. Like, we may not be developing the vaccine, but we could still be pretty damn proud that our industry, that sports and entertainment, is part of the cure of just like keeping people happy, keeping fans engaged, helping them come out of this crisis into a way that, we're going to be stronger for it. So to the class of 2020 and to anyone, like, I think, the comment for me in closing is just like, hold your head high, be super proud. Like everything that we have decided to do as a class, as a grad program, that doesn't go away. And in fact, there's an opportunity in this for everyone. So that's it. I think I can stop talking, take a drink of beer, and ask Kayla to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, Jessie, great way to get it started. Yeah, that Stella looks good. I don't know, I don't have one with me, but we'll get to that soon enough. So we're going to try to do a few questions. I'm going to start with one, and I totally hear you on just the need for us to view sports, especially those in this family who just live it and breathe it. I've been watching Korean baseball, and I'm fascinated. Just what it looks like from a sponsorship standpoint, watching the Samsung Lions, and they've got the new Galaxy phone pasted right on the side of their helmet, their batting helmet. But I guess I would ask you maybe what are some of the creative aspects of this crisis that has struck you? Maybe it's good creative that some other brand is doing. Maybe it's the way one of your clients have recovered and kind of try to reclaim some of the Olympic momentum. What has really excited you in terms of some of the things you've seen over the past few weeks?
Yeah, it's a great question, Matt. I guess there's probably two that come top of mind. First is, at least from an agency side, like we hear our clients talk about being customer first or consumer first all the time, but there's always kind of this natural tension of like, you say it, but how do you show it? And I do think like we've seen brands kind of take a step back and actually put consumers or people, whether that is, even internal employees first. So I think that was kind of just at a macro level, one way that, I think creativity, or it just has inspired me of like how brands are, changing or reacting to the time. I also think, I don't know if we've necessarily seen the fruits of it yet. But a lot of our clients, we work with a lot of tech clients, right? So we work with, the likes of Google and HPE and other big Silicon Valley corporations. And a lot of the conversations we're having right now is, how do our products and technologies play an authentic role when we come back for this? So like, you're not necessarily seeing that impact immediately because they're still trying to figure it out. But I think that notion of authentic product integration or authentic technology integration will actually be more prevalent or even further accelerated as a result of this.
Yeah, great answer. And I know that certainly our younger demos are really dialed in on authenticity. I think that's a great point, that it's gonna be elevated. Kayla's gonna bring a question in from the World Wide Web or Twitterville.
Yeah. Hey, Jessie, good to see you again. I have a question from class of 2021. Will Schmitz, I hope I said that right, Will, sorry. He asked, you mentioned passing up Kaler's great offers and picking a more risky contract option. Can you pass along some advice for those looking for opportunities during this time?
Yeah. Man, call that on my dig. That was not part of the questioning there. But I think that there's always a balance. And like I say, it's a heck of a lot easier for those of us that have been in the industry to say it now in retrospect. So like, I'm not naive to think like when you're in the moment and you have an offer in front of you and it's potentially your first offer ever, like there is a burning desire to take it. I think what I've learned is better to take a job of that surrounds you with the right people and the ability to have the right champions to kind of mentor you and grow you, as opposed to taking a job offer that's like what you want now. And so I think that was, outside of the kind of the snarky remark, I think that's kind of what is intended to say is like, you should, if you get the job, before the school year's over, but it feels like it has that longevity and the legs to take you there, take it. If you get the job offer, and it's not the right one, it's okay to wait. It's okay to make sure that you're being strategic and making sure it's the right fit.
Yeah, definitely. We have another one in the queue. So this is from Alex. I won't attempt to say the last name, but he is class of 2010. And he asked if you had any good stories from
No
NSF to share.
No. I know Alex. I know how to pronounce his last name too, and we're not sharing those stories. Okay. No, I will say the PC and the clean story that I will share from National Sports Forum is I was lucky enough to serve on the Case Cup team with friends in the class. And Andy Dolich actually was obviously part of it too. It was a really unique brief for NSF. It was the year where they talked about childhood obesity. And so non-traditional, our team came up with what we still to this day consider the most brilliant idea of all time. It was called Step Up Your Game, a pedometer that would track your steps. And lo and behold, it wasn't scalable, it perhaps wasn't feasible, or at least that's what the judges said. And then now insert Fitbit, and if we would have had licensed this thing, I would not have been presenting on a Friday night to the alumni, because I would have been sitting somewhere brilliant. So with Alex. So that's the clean version of the story. There might have been some embarrassing moments as part of that as well.
We have a few more minutes. We have a few more minutes. So I have a couple more. This is from Kiana Harris from the class of 2021 again. And so she asked, you started off in event ops. So what motivated you to pursue a business development role, and then moving into a client role? So her question specifically was about what made you stay in those roles as long as you have, all 3 buckets.
So I think there's two parts, and they're kind of tied in maybe how I think about it. I have a philosophy is like every 2 years, I kind of like look myself in the mirror and I ask a series of questions to myself. And it's like, number one, do you still love what you do? Yes. Okay, great. Like ask yourself the next question. So do you still love what you do? Are you still being challenged? Right. And so at the first inflection point, when I decided to kind of leave the event operations and go back to grad school, it was like, again, crazy and lucky and just fortunate, like within those short 4 years, I kind of did it all. Like, I think I had worked 20 global events within that. I had hit, the FIFA World Cup. Like I said, I had basically hit it all within 4 years, which, again, I pinch myself. Like I'm super fortunate. And so it was kind of getting to like, it was the same execution, just a different stage. Right. And so I needed a new challenge for myself. And that's kind of what prompted me to go back to grad school. I came back in a business development role, and maybe this is where I did listen to Kaler. So I didn't listen to him on the job, but I listened to him on like, you got to be tied to revenue, right? Like if you're going to grow, you got to be tied to revenue. And I went back in a business development role, but I think what made me stronger at business development, at least in the agency world, is like, I wasn't just one of those salespeople that you're like, oh shit, like what did she sell? Is it going to be successful? Like, is it operationally sound? Because I had lived on the other side. I was actually like selling things that I knew could be successful in execution. and then same, right? I got to that point where I didn't say yes to that second question. And I was like, okay, I want to move more into like a strategic consulting role. And it just kind of evolved that way. So that's, I guess, how I would answer that question. And I think it's a good practice for all of us, is just to continue to have that like self-assessment every couple of years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessie.
Great, Jessie. That was awesome. As I used to say on, I think it was ESPN Sports Center, you're off the Budweiser hot seat, but you're off the Stella hot seat. That was great. Again, you got us started on the right note, and we can't thank you enough for taking the time.